Hi, this is Bob Robotti. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, we're feeding your expectations and your excitement. So we figure we'd delay it a little bit. So therefore, you'd be champing at the bit to hear what we have to say. We're fortunate today to have Peter Jackson with us. He's the CFO of Builders FirstSource. He joined with Builders FirstSource back in November of 16. And so he's been there and seen and been a key participant and a team player in the building of a company. We talk a lot about businesses that go through like protracted and prolonged downturns, have the ability to kind of change businesses. And that's what we think, that not only is there like a restoration, but it's a metamorphosis. And we think, of course, Builders FirstSource today is a very different company. And 2023 obviously demonstrated that, right? You had industry experts like Ivy Zelman acknowledging that this is a different business than it's been. And so the first thing I'm going to ask you, Peter, to do is go through the quick, on slide 5, you go through a little bit of the history, because to make sure that people really understand what Builders FirstSource is today and the amalgamation it is, and how therefore, how it has transformed to a very different business in a weak point in the cycle, generated significant amount of earnings and free cash flow, and therefore is different than people think it was, and even what the perception is, and understand it today. Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, no, happy to do it, Bob. And thank you again for the opportunity to talk with you and your crew about what we're up to.
Great.
Yeah, I think that the history of Builders FirstSource in terms of the way that we combined initially with ProBuild and ultimately in 2021 with BMC, on top of all of the merger work with the smaller tuck-in deals along the way, has really changed our performance in the industry, the role that we play in terms of the share that we have, but more importantly, the way that we partner with home builders. Certainly our size matters, our coverage matters, but also the product portfolio. That was an area that early days, as you described, coming through the great financial crisis and growing out of the 2010s, 2012s era, was really an attempt to lean into where we could add value for builders. In many ways, it started with trusses, roof trusses in particular, but has really spread through the business in terms of different product that we offer and certain services that we offer as well. It's really focused on helping the builder be better at the art and craft of home building. It's certainly a catchphrase for us internally and externally in our marketing materials, but it certainly is true to our core in terms of how we think about our customer relationships. Mm-hmm. So that size, the opportunity to take cost out of the business, to find synergies, has certainly been very meaningful in terms of our profitability. But even more importantly is that exposure to value add and the ability to capture incremental margin from that. So while we're helping our customer, we're also helping ourselves.
So what I'd be interested in is, it seems to me as if the evolution of the business and trusses and off-site construction being a key piece of it, and some of the acquisitions you've made in the truss end, it really has extended the business and set up a much bigger market opportunity in terms of your participation in the multifamily market and your participation in the repair remodel market. So therefore, in my mind, you're almost transforming from someone who's helping deliver housing solutions to Americans as they move from one of those to another, and being able to service them in a very value-added, differentiated way.
No, that's exactly right. We're increasingly agnostic whether or not the new homes come from single family, traditional ownership, or single family rent to own, or even more recently, the multifamily space in the apartment buildings. And generally for us, that means 5-story and below wood structures. We're not generally talking about high rises or towers of any sort. And you're right, that is an opportunity that we've pursued. We've looked for ways to buy and focus on buying companies, not only that help grow our geographic expansion, but most of the time that are very focused on those value-added offerings. And over the past couple of years, that's been multifamily truss. There's been a lot of truss over the past few years, but in general, that's an area that we lean in on.
Right. It does seem it should reduce some of the volatility in the business, because as one housing component or the other gets more focus and concentration, you're going to be able to participate and be able to dial and switch to those things and be able to offer services and be value added. So I see that as a somewhat transformational, interesting point that positions you well.
No question. No one is doing it like we are. No one has leaned into it like we are. Certain of our competitors in the space have dabbled in it. Right. And we think we can not only kind of maintain and extend our lead in the core product offerings, we think there's a lot of service offerings that come along with that, whether it be install or digital.
Right. Right. Actually, maybe you talk about the install business, because that is one of the things you do highlight in the investor day, that you did talk about the growth in that business. And on a year-over-year basis, there's a lot of growth in it, especially given, right, my first involvement was with BMC, right, when it was after bankruptcy, and BMC had grown tremendously in service delivery in terms of labor provisions. And so therefore that, people are identified in the past that's been a problem. How do you think about that? How do you incorporate? How's the world different today? So how does the installed business fit in and is a logical extension that doesn't have some of the risks that the industry exposed them to in the past with that?
You're right about that. And there certainly has been a lot of discussion. I think there's two main points why it's a different business model now than what they dealt with back in the select build or the days when it was really an overhang. The first of which is it's narrower. So for the most part, we're not trying to offer services outside of our core product offering space. So for a while there was, labor was labor and we were going to be able to provide it. I think that's an area that we've certainly gone away from. So when we're talking about install, it's install of products that are part and parcel to our core. It's, it's framing, it's windows, it's product, even some markets stucco, because it's something we've done for a very, very long time. We have a lot of experience in the space. Mm-hmm. I'd say the second piece of that is the continued lack of skilled labor versus the number of starts that we have in this country. That has continued to put pressure on available trades and allowed us to step in and say, look, we have relationships. We can make the life of these trades better by maintaining the relationship, by running the business component of it. We can put a lot of business in front of them in a very consistent way over time. Our balance sheet is impervious, so there's never any question as to whether or not they can get paid. If they want to get paid every week, great. If they want to get paid periodically, great. But they never have to worry about that piece. Never have to worry about collections. That combination, those two factors, staying focused and having the relationships in the areas where builders really need those trades, and having the good business model to be able to provide that. We think that's what's made us the preferred partner for builders, and really a nice option for the trades instead of trying to run their own business, leveraging our relationships to keep themselves busy and profitable.
And of course, so in 21 was the combination of BMC and Builders, but later that year you also bought Paradigm, and so maybe I'll ask you to talk a little bit about that. Because it does seem as if, some of the opportunities today are expanding the share of wallet, getting more things that go into the home, and then also continuing to really advance technology and to be a group of one where you're potentially uniquely positioned to be able to offer solutions that no one else can, and therefore further embed yourself with builders. Right.
That's exactly right. So. Yeah, we started in 2017 talking about what opportunities do we have as Builders FirstSource to leverage technology and really differentiate ourselves on that side of the fence. There hadn't been a lot of investment in the industry broadly, and where there had been investment, I would say it hasn't been very successful in terms of utilization. What we saw were a lot of individual point solutions, things that people were doing that were valuable within a narrow band. So renderings were pretty interesting. People were using them. Some people had some scheduling tools. Some people had some things they were doing with the digital twin. So taking the architectural design and turning it into a digital representation of the home that was to be built. but nobody had really pulled it together. You know, kind of analogous to the early 2000s, digital camera, listening device, you know, telephone. There really hadn't been a way to bring it together in an end-to-end platform. So we saw that as an option, but ultimately it needed to be anchored on that digital twin mentality, right? That true plan, this truly structurally buildable plan, rather than the architect's concept that would really drive the build process. Master plans, real quality, usable material by the builder and the trades and by the vendors like us. So that was really the impetus for the Paradigm acquisition. They had some technology at their core. They had done some really nice configuration work around the doors and windows space, and we saw that as something that could be scaled to represent the entire house. They may sound simple, but windows and doors are surprisingly complex in terms of their selection and configuration options. And the engine that Paradigm had devised was something we recognized as something that could be expanded. And when we partnered with Paradigm on some in the early days around estimating, we saw a real opportunity there. So we acquired them in the middle of 2021. And over the past couple of years, we've built out that idea, that concept, the idea to leverage that configuration tech to the broader configurable home based on that three-dimensional digital twin. The most powerful aspect of that is where we integrate that, we connect that into the BFS offering, meaning it's a truly shoppable plan. It's a shoppable digital twin. So when they see that they want to build this house and we have the estimate of what the bill of material will be off of that house for, let's say, the structure, they have the ability, our customers that utilize this tool have the ability to make selections about how they want to build that house, whether it's options, the bonus room, the third car, the garage, or whether it's specific selections. Oh, I want the hardy siding, or I want the traditional siding, I want the metal roof or the asphalt roof. You can make those selections and in real time get updates to the quotation. And you do that because this is the true structural design. It has real measurements, real intelligence around it. And of course, those offerings are delivered by BFS. So then we can tell you when it's going to be delivered. We have a schedule, and you can pay your bills online and do all of those things in one integrated platform. So that's been the build. That's been the heavy lift over the past couple of years. And we finally finished the MVP, the minimum viable product, and then the beta, or I guess vice versa, the beta and the MVP, and we had the full rollout in the past month here. So we had a big splash intro at IBS. People got to see the tool. A lot of builders looking at it, a lot of interest and excitement about it. But ultimately, it becomes a platform for the home builder to have really an end-to-end control around their plan, the way the subs work together, the schedule that they're going to execute the build on. And then powerfully for us, of course, is the ability to allow the customers to shop for the products necessary to build the house. Initially, it's just our stuff, right? It's just what we've baked into it. But we've got 2,000 or 3,000 SKUs in there, and that number increases every day. And we think that's something that over time will be pretty compelling for builders and for vendors as well.
So I'm actually going to bring Mike in. So Mike DeRopp, my colleague, I couldn't make it to the Builders Show this year, but he did. And he was at the show and, of course, did see a number of the exhibitions and information, and therefore, can share his understanding, what he saw, and how that kind of all fits in, and ask you some questions on that. Mike?
Great.
Hi, Peter. Before I do that, I just want to remind everybody that's on the call participating with us. You can ask a question in a few already that I'll work on with you. But in terms of the Builders Show, I have to say I was very impressed with Builders booth and what you guys were doing. Everything was geared towards the digital emphasis, and the demonstrations that were occurring on stage to bring people into the booth, as well as the salespeople on the floor interacting with the builders, going through demonstrations. I didn't see anything else like that when I was there. So I think one of the things we've gotten a lot of inquiries on is, the interest level on the digital solutions and what you're doing, when you talk about it, you say you're out in front of the competition, but a lot of people are talking about it as well. So can you tell us a little bit more about what differentiates you and what you're doing, and how that flows into what you hope to accomplish as you look at your 2026 targets that you laid out in the Investor Day?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of reasons why both were differentiated and there's a stickiness to it. I think the biggest differentiation goes back to that comment I was making before about point solutions. So specific examples, right? You've got folks out there a ton of folks that do renderings. And what that means for the uninitiated is that you take an architect's two-dimensional design, you send it over to basically an artist, and they envision what that looks like, and they turn it into a 3D picture that home buyers, many of us have a tough time with those two-dimensional plans. What does that really feel like? They turn it into something that you can walk around or walk through. I'm talking digital mainly, right? This is just a two-dimensional picture. Those are easy. But the ability to turn that into a three-dimensional rendering is good. The problem with them, though, is they're not actually buildable. They're the artist's vision of what this should be, right? Someone's turned it into a CAD/CAM design, but it's not what you're actually going to build. What folks actually build is what we do, right? So we see 350,000 plans a year already, helping customers come up with their bill of materials for the structural design of the home. And so having the partnership where we're doing the trusses for them, right? We're providing them, in many cases, sealed plans for the trusses. We're helping them with the bill material, and then ultimately the decision-making about exactly how that ceiling is going to be connected with precision. That's what makes ours different, right? These aren't simple. They're not beautiful from a purely rendering perspective. These are beautiful from this is what you're going to build your master plan off of. And this is what you're really going to be able to order, because the specificity of the plan is truly aligned with the structural design. Powerfully, it is a connecting function through the rest of the build process, meaning builders have control, but they can decide who can see, meaning they can assign the plumber and the electrician and the HVAC person, as well as the framer, to have access to the plan. Real-time markups allows them to put notes on mistakes or issues long before the build gets completed, meaning conflicts, concerns, issues can be identified and shared with one set of plans, as opposed to, oh, here's your set plumber, here's your set electrician. Both of you are wandering off with plan sets that actually don't match what was built because the framer changed it before they ever got there. Mm-hmm. So that ability to keep everybody connected, very, very powerful, increases the efficiency of the builder. That's the type of thing that we think is unique to what we do based on our skill set, that no one else has it come anywhere close to. And then when you layer on the shoppability of it and the scheduling, which brings all of those players together with the materials, right? Here's when the framer needs to be there. By the way, here's when the delivery is going to be there. Very, very powerful in terms of keeping the builder efficient, connected, very, very professional. All this, depending on the builder's discretion, can be shown to the home buyer. They know where they are in the schedule. They understand what the plan looks like. And then the home configure functionality that allows the selections you had talked about previously, the metal roof, the asphalt roof, what it looks like, and all of it with the visualization overlay that leaves the home buyer with the sense of, oh, this is what I'm getting. This is what it looks like. This is why that peak matters, or what happens if I change something, in a very visual way. Very, very powerful.
So, and of course, a key thing is, of course, getting your customers to adapt this, right? And so I guess that is one of the hurdles you do have, right? So,
No question.
COVID, when it did happen, accelerated the adoption of trusses, and so therefore, external developments help there dramatically. What's the issues you anticipate confronting to get that kind of acceptance when you've built it? Now, how do you get them to come and to use it? And so that'll be part of the next part of the equation, right?
As usual, Bob, you hit the nail on the head. That's where I think the real challenge is. There's no question in my mind that technology is far and away better than anybody else's, and that our lead is all but insurmountable. The real question is, does everybody use it like we think they will?
Right.
I would say out of the gate, the feedback has been tremendous, very, very optimistic. Don't want to be overly excited because first movers and early adopters are usually excited about cool tech, and we have the cool tech. Right. Where I think the challenge lies is getting all of the individual players, the folks that are already trusted to make sure the homes are done right, to be engaged in this. So in my world, on the BFS side of the fence, that's the OSRs, the outside sales reps, the ISRs, the inside sales reps, the support folks, right? The ones that are dealing with the builder every day with their frustrations and changing the schedules and changing the order and getting the pricing. Those teams, along with the estimators and designers, need to be integrated. They're integrated today because that's how we do business, but it's very manual. This starts to create a platform wherein we as an internal BFS team can be much more closely aligned. Data is shared more seamlessly. It's more efficient. And that's a lot of the pre-work we've been doing, getting folks trained, getting teams up and running, and making sure they have what they need, right? Not only improving the software that we're offering to our customers, but also what we're using internally on the BFS side. That's step one. Step two is making sure we have the resources necessary to support what builders want to do, right? So we talked about all those SKUs that we have available from our product portfolio that we have in the tool. But if you're a builder, you may not want to sell metal roofs. Well, we don't do that. I only want to show asphalt roofs. And by the way, I only do these 2 brands because those other brands aren't good. Helping them to curate their catalog that's displayed to the home buyer so they can only pick from what we want. We have that. And so that's some of the support that we're using. Again, it's connecting the builder as they are utilizing the tool to be able to increasingly basically leverage all the functionality. One of the more powerful things that we find builders to really like about this tool is what we call Home Optimize. So this is where our people are working with the builders team, generally the framer, as well as at least a handful of the subs, to be able to build the house virtually before you get to the job site. So you find the conflicts, you find those points where the electrical and the HVAC are in the same chase within the home, and you fix that before you get to the job site. Gotten really, really positive feedback about the efficiency that creates, the conflicts that resolves ahead of time, and ultimately the money that it'll save builders, both large and small, if they take that approach. Again, something we're offering that no one else can do because they don't have the digital twin, because they don't have the knowledge of how to do takeoffs, how to do designs, and then ultimately what the product is that you're going to be providing.
Thank you. So one of the things is you're building it, but the other one is perfecting it. And so that does seem as if, a lot of the things you've done in terms of automating the trusses, I imagine, make them more efficient. And then the more efficient they are, the better the customer uptake is going to be. And I guess in one of your things, you mentioned that you have a just-in-time program in the Dallas market for millwork, and therefore you're doing something different in the automation of millwork, it sounds like, to make it more efficient and therefore a better service to be delivered and therefore more uptake. So can you talk about the things you're doing internally to continue to improve your processes and automation that therefore make these things more seamless and therefore more desirable and more likely to have customer uptake?
Absolutely. So, you hit the nail on the head. In my mind, there's sort of 3 pieces that come together to make us the customer of choice or the vendor of choice for our customers. The first of which is the product portfolio options that our customers have. Yes, you can buy a door slab from us, but why would you when we can give you a pre-hung door? Yes, you can buy dimensional lumber, but why would you when we can sell you a roof truss or ready frame or wall panel, whatever the option is that's best fit for you as a builder. The second piece of that is the coverage. So it's great that I sell it, but I don't know if I don't sell it near you, and if I don't have capacity to be able to provide it near you when you call, well, that's a lose situation as well. So we've invested tremendously in the past couple of years, over $130 million in incremental capacity in As you described, millwork, so the ability to pre-hang doors, the ability to do high-speed cutting, and in the truss and wall panel and ready frame business, incremental saws, tables, stackers, presses, whatever, robots even in that space, to increase our ability to have capacity. We certainly suffered, like everyone else, during the COVID supply chain disruption and not being able to do as much as we needed to do. We've leaned in really hard over the past couple of years to make sure we're ready for the next run. We're confident that the investments we've made will help us be a far better partner. And then the third thing is linking it to the salesperson, right? That expertise is unique, right? Those relationships matter. The experience matters. Our subject matter experts in all sorts of different areas of the business, whether it be engineered wood, design, even siding. We're exceptionally skilled in that area, and bringing those pieces together is really what we think the really powerful aspect of how we service. And we see these digital tools as just being one more arrow in the quiver of our sales team to demonstrate our differentiated service. And like you said, when the customer picks it and they want it, we have the facilities and the wherewithal to deliver.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you talk about is providing more of the products associated with the building of a home. I think when you were talking about off takes and the things you're doing digitally, specifically one of the things you mentioned was siding. And I imagine it's siding, doors, and windows are three product categories in which you do sell. But what are some of the most logical, easiest things that really do integrate in that you can continue to gain share of those? And what are the critical pieces in that? And am I understanding that's the more identifiable, shorter term opportunities that are kind of in front of you?
Yeah, so what we're focused on right now in both our core business and through the digital tool would be very, very familiar to everyone, right? It's what we already do today. It's taking advantage of our skill sets in markets where we do it well and expanding it to markets where we don't. We're very, very good at pre-hung doors. We don't do it much really in the Phoenix market, so we're leaning into expanding that in the Phoenix market. We started with an acquisition of Pima in 2021. So that's the type of thing that we'll continue to do. Continue to leverage our toehold or our foothold with customers to expand the product offer. But within the tool itself on the digital side, it gets very, very interesting because you can start to take advantage of some of the functionality that's available to just expand the quality and the benefit of the tool utilization. So I'll give you an example. I mentioned when we bought Paradigm that they were very good at window and door configuration, right? That's where they got their start. So, you walk into your favorite home improvement retailer and you want to buy a window, more likely than not, they're going to utilize Paradigm's software to help configure that window. So when it's ordered from your favorite window manufacturer, it's buildable and it has a price and it's what the customer wants. Well, that's not baked into our tool yet, right? We haven't gotten far enough along in our evolutionary process to have the button so you can hop out to the window config tool. But that's certainly doable. That's well within our control. That's on our path of further development. Similar to doors. That's the most obvious stuff that we can do. Doing a round trip with our truss process, leveraging that digital twin. Those are all slightly more advanced functional components of the tool that we will continue to build out over the coming, months and years to be able to enhance it over time. As good as this tool is today, as good as our digital offering is, it is far from done.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you did mention is ready frame. And I think that was one of the points to try to get increased adoption of ready frame and roll that out. Because again, that does show, of course, the difficulty in getting people to take up a really good idea. Because my recollection is, right, that's a BMC thing that started in Seattle probably in 2010 or 11 or something like that. So, it's moving. Do you have expectations in the next year, the 2 years that does have uptake, and what opportunity does something like that give, and how big an opportunity is that?
You're right about Ready Frame being one of those great ideas that has struggled to get a lot of adoption. I think it's grown quite quickly, not as quickly as I think many thought, given how ingenious it is in terms of adding value. I think what it starts to do, though, is create a dynamic where there are more opportunities to put it in front of home builder customers and give it as an option than you would in a manual process. The efficiency that comes from utilizing the tool gives you additional bandwidth and capacity to do that work. And certainly putting it in a digital environment allows kind of that radio button options. Would you like the dimensional lumber? Would you like the fully prefabricated wall panels? Or would you like Ready Frame? That starts to become a reality in that digital space. So certainly believe over time, there's an opportunity for a take up. We don't have any models around that or estimates around that, but certainly see, just broadly speaking, digital will lend our industry to the use of offsite fabricated components in a way that is unique from what we have done historically, right? Those plans moving around and not being in a digital environment, having those disconnected through all the trades, meant that the end result of the home that was constructed was different in some important ways than what people expected when they did the original design or even had one of the versions of the blueprint. Having a real-time digital twin starts to change that and really opens the doors to offsite fabrication in a way that wasn't accessible to us historically.
What's the interplay? Because you're talking about inside salespeople, outside salespeople. Because it seems to me as if framers aren't home builders, right? Home builders kind of hire all these contractors, and one of them is the framer. And so to a certain extent, I imagine there's a double sale. One of the sales is to go to the home builder to say, listen, you need to have your contractors use these things because there are these advantages, including, you'll effectively save money, you'll shorten the cycle time, you'll do all these things. And maybe the framer may be resistant because in the short term, he's got to do something different and maybe he doesn't want to do it. So therefore, how does that work? And how does that interplay? And how does that potentially increase the pickup of some of these things that will then further differentiate you? Getting the home to have the contractors he's working for him do these things also.
Well, I would say maybe an example is the easiest way to describe it, and then talk a little bit about why we think we're uniquely positioned to benefit. So, historically, you're right, framers were hired, right, as a sub, but I would go back to maybe the smaller builders. Many times the contractor is the builder, right? They were the ones who learned at starting with framing how to build a house. And that led to the confidence to be able to do the rest, to hire the specialty trades, if you will. With that in mind, it's not a surprise to think that framers don't want to give up any value to a start. So if they traditionally make $8,000 on a 2,000 square foot home to frame it from stick, that's an $8,000 value to them. Now they have a certain number of crews that they would assign to that, but that's how they envision it, right? That house is worth $8,000. Well, if we show up and say, hey, we're going to pre-cut all of this for you, we're going to give you a manual of how to do it, or to take a more extreme example, we're going to pre-assemble all the walls for you. You just have to show up and nail them together. The question then goes to the framer, how much to frame that house? And they say, oh, I know the answer to that. It's $8,000. And our answer to that is, well, wait a minute, it doesn't make any sense. We already cut it all. We nailed it all together. All you have to do is show up and put it together. You say, yeah, but that house is worth $8,000 to me, so I'm going to charge you $8,000. Well, that doesn't work, right? We've got equipment. We've done a bunch of work. We've delivered it to the job site. Like, we need a little bit of that to offset the investment we've made. And so you'll find a resistance to adoption because the framers are unfamiliar or uncomfortable with the idea that they could do more houses and make more dollars in total by taking advantage of the efficiencies that come from some of these offerings to be more of what they are. So one way that comes to fruition in terms of we get there anyway, the obvious way is you got to convince the framers to use this new technology. And some of them do. We train, we help them along the way. You can, tell the builders to strong arm the framers. It's just slow, and that's the history. One way we've been successful, though, is we just use it ourselves. Meaning, We offer install. We'll install the framing for
Right.
you. We'll charge the $8,000 and say you don't have to worry about it. Maybe we'll charge, you know, $7,800 or $7,500 in order to be able to get it. But all of that savings, all that efficiency now is ours. So if we use wall panels on the job site, now we hire our own team. They get in and out of their lickety split because of the efficiencies we provided, and it's captured in its entirety. So that's one way we've been able to leverage the technology, whether it be ready frame, depending on the market, or framing, or you know, the whole thing. If we're talking about North Florida construction, where we'll sell you the shell, that's where it gets a little bit more interesting, and where the increased use of digital makes it even easier for us to make that as an offer.
So of course, my recollection of having been kind of on the inside and looking at this business is that, right, this is a local business. Every market is very different. And therefore, what products are sold, what margins, all of those things are very different. And I imagine when you're doing the labor, there's even more differentiation, kind of which markets can you do that, and which, to the extent you try to do that, you'd be competing with your framing customer who has a great relationship with you. So therefore, could you like this people like an appreciation for the local nature of the business, and then the scale and the footprint you have and the opportunities and advantages that gives you versus someone who's a local person in terms of what you know and what you potentially can bring to bear in certain markets, you know, as a differentiator also.
Yeah, as usual, Bob, that's a great point. I mean, this is a country that is very heterogeneous when it comes to the way we build. It is materially different in terms of approach, even materials used, even who you do business with between California and Texas and Florida and Maryland, right? The nature of what you're doing, you have a lot, you know, most homes in the Maryland, Virginia, DC market are offsite fabricated components, whether it be wall panels, roof trusses. That's generally the standard up there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in Texas, historically, it's all stick. Just now starting to get into the utilization of roof trusses because of that available labor. In both of those markets, you're generally negotiating with the home builder. In California, you don't talk to the home builder in most cases, you're talking to the framer. And so the framer is your customer directly. And in, you know, parts of Florida, you don't have any framing on the first floor, you're using block. So the whole world is different in each one of those markets. But you're right, it does become, you know, a question of adoption, pace of adoption. The value proposition in each one of those markets is slightly different. But what's true in all of those markets is that there are less skilled trades than there were, you know, 15, 20 years ago. Right. There are, you know, more possibilities to increase efficiency and help the home builders process be more efficient, more reliable, right? That consistency certainly has value. And when when you overlay some of the tools, these digital tools, for example, to take the waste out, the capture there starts to become meaningful. No question, all of us are worried about affordability, right? Whether you're a home builder or a supplier, we're all worried about the affordability of a home. We see no better way to make homes more affordable than to take the waste out of them. And we think we're an important part of that, both in our value-added products, but also with our services.
And I'm going to ask one more question. We should open it up because you have questions. And that is new product, new introductions. Like, how much work do you do there? Because it seems to me as if, right, change is slow to happen. There are probably different ways to do things. There are disruptive potential for things. And therefore, and you know, people who should be concerned are concerned about the environment. And so obviously a home is one of those things that people say it's one of those things, one of the 10 things that it's 1/3 of the energy usage and CO2 production are homes. But anyway, it's one of the things people talk about. And so it seems as if you are uniquely positioned given your spread of where you do business and what you know and the size. Are there opportunities there that, you know, obviously won't be something tomorrow, but really have the potential to further differentiate you?
No question at all in my mind. You know, if you think about the opportunities created by a three-dimensional digital twin and the ability to build offsite, you start to think through the ultimate consequences of virtual builds and optionality. Mm-hmm. So if you run, and I'll throw AI into the mix, right? Whether it's a person or a machine, you say, well, here's my design. Give me a version of this that's the luxury model. Give me a version of this that's the green model. Give me a version of this that's the low cost model. And there are decisions you're making all along the way that'll help you deliver on that, right? And there's no better way to do that than to do it in a virtual environment. Same true with options for products that you could potentially, put into the mix. There's a prerequisite to us going too far down that road, and that's adoption in the core, right? You have to have home builders that see this as an advantage, see the benefit, need some momentum around that. But my sense of it is high confidence that that's going to happen. And that is naturally going to lead to more and more doors being opened to have incremental products in there. Now, whether it's products that we already sell that haven't added yet, or products that other people sell that we can facilitate the sale, there's tremendous value for the builder with that type of optionality. And big builder, small builder. It's I would say one of the beautiful aspects of this. Whether you believe the publics are 40 or 50% of all homes built in this country, that certainly leaves a lot of opportunity for those that are smaller and may not have a big IT department.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you a question, a quick one, and that is trusses, offsite component construction. What's the lowest percentage in your market, and what's the highest percentage in any one market? Don't tell me which markets, of course, but just to give a sense for, again, that concept of how things are so local and how they're differentiated. And so what is the range? And therefore,
you talk about utilization.
Yeah.
What's the penetration of roof trusses?
Yeah. And what's the lowest in any market, and what's the highest in any market? Right.
Yeah. I would tell you high end is probably, 80, 90%. You're talking just everybody's using it. There are certain examples where it's just too custom and too complex. They don't want to pay the design fee. You could use it for anything, but they say, forget it. I've got a really good person over here who knows how to do it. The opposite end of that spectrum, 10% maybe. In some of the markets where, historically labor's been real cheap, there've been a lot of skilled trades.
And so I imagine it gravitates someplace closer to the higher end of the range, although that's a huge range. 80% to 10% is a huge range. So
yeah, well, best guess, I mean, from what we can tell, maybe 2/3 penetration throughout the country.
Okay.
I have a few questions from the audience here, and one of them is kind of a follow-on to what Bob just asked about. How much more penetration do you have for your truss, your millwork, your pre-build in your markets? Can you talk a little bit more specifically about that?
Yeah, I think that the answer is different for each one. I kind of just gave you the truss. That's our best estimate, around 2/3. If you go to wall panels or ready frame, you're talking single digits in terms of penetration and utilization. Lot of opportunity there. I think that it's a continuation of the discussion around available skilled trades. It's a continuation of the conversation we were having earlier about adoption and getting people comfortable with the idea that they can make more money by leveraging technology. And again, that alignment factor, keeping everybody on the same page, if that's the approach you're taking. I don't have a number on millwork and doors. That's a great question. I've asked it myself. I just don't know the answer.
But obviously it's a lower penetration on millwork and doors, do you think?
Our estimate is far lower. We think roof trusses is by far the most utilized.
Right.
But
and millwork, doors, and windows, therefore, also brings along the potential for more sales of doors and windows, and therefore capturing more of that share or wallet, I imagine, too. So as it gets pickup, there's a double benefit, because not only do you have that pre-provided service, but you also sell more product.
That's right. And in many cases, get more install.
Right.
Another one we had from two audience members was, what's the difference between your digital product and building information modeling system?
So it is a BIM. Our digital product is a building information modeling system. It is, I think it's called 5D BIM technically speaking, because it has a budgeting and a time associated with the three-dimensional model. It is unique in that it is built for the industry from a bottom-up perspective. So one of the questions we get, right? Well, the commercial folks have been doing this for years. Aren't you afraid they're going to come in and steal your lunch money? And the answer is no, I'm not, because I called them and asked them if they'd like to partner with us. And they said, we want no part of residential. And the logic they gave is, look, we use these things to build nuclear power plants and skyscrapers. It's very, very sophisticated and very heavy. We've tried to use this for single family. It doesn't work. So we came at it from the exact opposite direction. We took a window configurator and a door configurator and enhanced it and went from super light to just heavy enough. So we're very confident we've got the right solution, and we're not worried about the big guys coming towards us, because they told us they didn't want to. We're like, we want to partner with you. They said, no, go away.
Oh, industry facts. We didn't really ask you where the industry is today.
We are bouncing around a little bit.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. So what do you see in the market? I guess we didn't ask you a question. People always ask you that question. What's the market look like today? What do you think the market's going to look like for the next 6 months or the next year? So I guess that's a relevant question. How do you think the year plays out? Where are the opportunities, and what's the market situation today?
Well, I mean, I won't talk about 24 in terms of our perspective. If I talk broader about the market, I'd say that the builders that we hear from in the public space are optimistic. You know, the big guys in general have done very, very well in this window of time because of their ability to buy down rates. So no question in our mind that, you know, the Hortons and the Lennars of the world have certainly leveraged their mortgage companies and their buy down skills to be able to take share. I think in general, the sense that interest rates are going to start to be cut, whether or not it happens in June or July or some other period of time, notwithstanding, the idea that rates will start to come back down will undoubtedly be beneficial to the market. There's no bigger impact on affordability in the short run than mortgage rates. So that, I think, has people optimistic. In general, I think what we've seen is some optimism about growth versus prior year. But the one thing I would maybe warn people off of, don't extrapolate Horton and Lennar's headlines to what the market's going to do. They're substantially stronger than everybody else. And some of the custom folks are, I would argue, just flat out struggling. You know, the other 50% of the market that can't buy down rates, they have to deal with the affordability front and center, right? And some of that's building smaller homes. Some of that's not building as many homes.
So let me ask you a question that is on wood. Your long-term projection just estimate a $400 per board foot number. It seems to me as if that can't be right, because that's the numbers today that the industry has had in 1920 and 2023, and nobody in the industry makes any money. So the idea that you permanently have an industry that makes no money, even though it is well capitalized and can afford to do that in the short term, it seems to me as if you need a price of $500 a board foot in order for that industry to make money and be anywhere near sustainable. And so it seems to me as your estimates there are in terms of that pricing factor that's not inconsiderate for you. And what that means is the higher cost means, does that drive more component manufacturing? It seems to me you're being too conservative, because that can't be the long-term sustainable price.
That is a fair statement, and I actually don't disagree with you. What I will correct you on one point is I didn't say that is my long-term estimate. I said that is the basis on which I built my long-term estimate. And the important differential there is I became very, very exhausted with people trying to have me tell them what the future price of commodities is. And I said, look, we're going to be tremendously successful regardless of the price of commodities. Right. We have this wonderful position in the market where we make money when commodity prices are low, unlike the mills, and we make great piles of money when the price of commodities are high. Right? Because we have product, we have access to product, and we have the delivery mechanism that people need. Right. So what we decided was the best option was to say, look, there's a long-term historical average that no one can argue with, is a very reasonable and conservative place to start. let's do our reporting starting with that. Right. I want there to be any question at any point that we can do as good from a commodity price perspective as we've outlined. And then from then on, it's upside, it's gravy. I agree with your point, though. It's pretty tough to argue that 400 is reasonable when everybody's losing money. But until they start acting in a way that doesn't lose money, it's pretty tough for me to argue it's time to change our baseline for the forecasting purposes. We'll likely get there over time, but we've noticed the same thing you did.
Mike, got the question?
I'll jump in here with another one, Bob.
Yeah.
Do you have an IRR threshold associated with mergers and acquisitions and stock buybacks?
We do, but it's pretty dynamic. So what I mean by that is each and every quarter we go through and we look at the analysis of where we are with the stock price versus the forecast, with the historical returns on M&A and where we think we are in the market. And we look at a similar analytic around the CapEx investments, particularly the growth CapEx investments that we're making in terms of ROI. We're doing comparisons between each one of those options and trying to stay balanced between long and short term, right? So there's always a short term aspect of ROI that you're trying to optimize, but you can never lose track of that longer run perspective either. And we compare and try and allocate resources between them in a real in a way to optimize the best we can between that long and short term. The good news is, based on what we're seeing, based on what we believe about this business, all of them are green. All of them are well in excess of our weighted average cost of capital. And I think that positions us well to make a lot of good decisions and make a lot of money for investors regardless. We haven't talked about those publicly, and I don't plan to, but we certainly look at all of them and compare.
My guess would be there's really nothing to say. But of course, Home Depot is buying SRS Roofing. So therefore is buying one of the, not your vertical, but a related vertical, because if you're doing roofing, you're also doing siding. So, there's definitely some points of contact between that business and your business. Any thoughts and reflections on that?
It was interesting. I mean, we'd heard the rumors. We do less than $200 million of sales in roofing in a year. Right. So it doesn't really touch us. We don't really do any landscaping. We don't do any pool. Right. So it's interesting. There's a certain logic that I respect, that the Depot folks believe they have an opportunity to grow with pro. Those are pros that are maybe a little closer to their world, right? Smaller scale. Most of your pros in the roofing business or your installers, your smaller businesses, certainly some larger ones, but not like the home builders. So it's interesting. We certainly keep an eye on the gorilla in the market, making sure that they're not, leaning into our space in a way that we can't handle. But I think what it boils down to for us is we still have a unique and differentiated position in terms of how we service. Our subject matter expertise, the ability to do estimates, takeoffs, value add, digital. Nobody else has that. Certainly Home Depot doesn't have that. Shoot, they don't even have trade credit until recently. So they're a very, very different beast, but a scary beast if they decide to look our way. So we continue to try and extend our lead and ensure that we're still the vendor of choice, right, when we're dealing with home builders and pros.
So the repair and remodel business, how do you differ from someone like Home Depot, who is going after repair and remodel also, and that contractor? And is there as you pointed out there, the siding roofing guy is a different contractor than the one you kind of do business with? Is that what it is? Is there different people clearly in that business and different pieces of repair and remodel, which is a broad categorization that therefore doesn't put you so competitive with them, or at least who's your customer that you're going after in that business?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll answer it in two different ways. One is to say everybody's a customer of Home Depot and Lowe's. Every one of our customers buys from Home Depot and Lowe's, right? They run out of duct tape, they need a new drill bit, they're going to be in Home Depot and Lowe's most days. Where we're competing with them are in low single digits of our business in certain markets around the country where we have a retail focus, right? So we talked about Dixie Line, San Lorenzo in Southern California, Spenard's in Alaska, although HD and Lowe's really aren't up there to any meaningful degree. That's where we see them sort of head to head, and we do quite well. We've always done quite well. We're a local business that has an offering in a geographic positioning that they can't compete with. Where the bulk of our R&R is, and where I think you're referring to in terms of how do we stay differentiated from them, that's where you're talking about pros that are focused on the large scale remodels. So in HD parlance, the super complex, not the complex, the super complex, right? Large scale remodels or specialty areas. So for example, we've got a really great deck business in a couple of urban markets that are these smaller pros, but that's where we're layering in our skill set. We've got pressure treated lumber, Trex, AZEK, design services, lighting, all of the subject matter expertise that makes us great. Whereas Depot would tell you, yeah, log in, there's a plan out there, you can use it for free and we'll send you the wood. So it's just a very different type of offering in terms of the way we do it. And that's something we need to continue to lean into, right? So how do you take all of those skills that we already have and layer digital and design and configuration on top of it to help builders, large and small, in that pro R&R space be better, look better, be more pro.
Of course, I always think about the pro build acquisition as being very different than all the other. So stock building supply, BMC, and Builders FirstSource were focused on new building in the Southeast, larger markets, big business. But a lot of the pro build business was further Midwest, places like that, where they probably sold everything. So it isn't that you're in these verticals of like, I do wallboard and I do insulation and I do lumber. In those markets, you sell everything. And so, but that's probably can't be that business anymore, but you still have locations where that's different than the core business, which is the major home building markets.
That's right. And generally in those smaller markets where we're selling everything, we're not competing against HD and Lowe's, right? They're probably not even competing against Menards.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in your presentation toward the end of it, you do talk about multiples and where you have been, where you are. And of course, then you say industrial distributors and you have much higher multiples, and you suggest, that makes sense. What's the industrial logic what's the economic logic? How's the business different today? And how does that become more not as crazy as people might think, to say, oh, wait a second, this is a cyclical business company that sells home building stuff that, that's not the same business at all. How's the business different today? What people aren't really appreciating. So therefore, it has a lot more economic characteristics, more like those businesses. And therefore, that's not a crazy idea at all.
Yeah. So recap where we've been. We did two of the largest mergers in the history of our market, and then we did another $2 billion worth of M&A on top of that, and we're still at. So the consolidation story is real.
Right.
We're by far the biggest, right? We've got more than 3,800 sales reps in the space. We have almost 600 locations. We have 8,000 pieces of rolling stock and trucks that we're managing our logistics fleet around the country. We're easily a top 20 fleet in terms of job site delivery capability. But we're a top 20 fleet, period. But our job site capability is really unmatched. You layer all that together. What did we do with it? Well, we've taken out, creeping up on $800 million of annual savings when you look at our synergies and our productivity and how we've invested in this business to be better at what we do. So we're materially different in terms of size, scale, and efficiency out of the gate. And then we've layered on top of all of that this unmatched product portfolio, the investment in technology, the integrated approach with which we go to business. We go to the market, run our business, and then the digital tools that are unmatched in terms of what the industry needs and what we're capable of providing. That has led to margins that are materially different. You talked about gross margins in the mid-20s when you were having a good year. You were talking about high single digits when you were having a good year back when the businesses were small, right? When they weren't doing much on the value add side, when it was a third of the business or so. Now that it's more than half the business, we're talking about margins in the low teens, the mid-teens in our 26th Investor Day targets. You're talking about normalized gross margins in the low 30s. So that's really the difference, right? It's that scale and the efficiency, the professionalization, and the sophistication of the product offering that has correspondingly better margins associated with it because of the benefits derived by everybody involved. That has created a really, really powerful competitor in the space, one with a differentiated position, and we think is one that will continue to grow and take further advantage of that position.
And then a decade ago, I remember Floyd Sherman saying to me, "Oh, an important differentiator, Builders FirstSource back then, when it was a much smaller company and had the smaller footprint, was the relationship with key suppliers." And of course, my observation would be over the last 10 years, right, the number of suppliers is substantially consolidated also. So the supply side of the equation is very different. And so what's the relationship that you have with suppliers? Because clearly you are a very key, important distributor, and those suppliers in large parts maybe had their own distribution at one time, and long ago that's gone away. So what's the connection and the symbiotic factors that again leads to a differentiation, I would imagine, for you versus others?
Yeah, well, I think that what you're describing is, our relationships and our connection to our vendors is something that we think is a bit of a secret sauce, right? We've got the best partners. We work really hard at building and maintaining a relationship with those key partners. We work hard to try and find ways to address each other's pain points, right? Well, we don't have visibility. We're working hard to be able to pull together the data flow to help them manage their factories more efficiently.
Right.
The way that we distribute, how do we align what we're trying to do? What are those opportunities to use reload facilities, either theirs or ours, to better manage inventory and get better streamlining. As you look back to these relationships and its impact during COVID and the supply chain disruptions, we were most vendors, top 2, top 1 customer. We stayed committed, we stayed loyal, and we, I think built a lot of positive relationships, or expanded on those positive relationships, perhaps better said, through that window of time. And it's something, we continue to do. We had our operational leadership meeting. We invite our vendors to be part of those events with us, to ensure that we're, building on that, both, in an informal as well as a formal environment, but looking for ways. What products are they trying to invest in, to move more of? How can we be a partner? And, what do we need from them in terms of where we see the market is going and where they should be investing alongside us?
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate your time. Appreciate all these thoughts and the honest answers and sharing with us. If people do have questions, to continue to send them in, and we'll pass them along, or we'll get an answer for you. In the meantime, Mike has 1 or 2 things he'd like to close out. But thank you, Peter, so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure as always.
Yes. Thank you, Peter. And before we close out the meeting, I do have to read some important disclosures. Please be advised that this event is being recorded. This presentation is for information purposes only and should not be construed as investment advice or a solicitation to invest. Past performance does not indicate future results. Investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Robotti Securities LLC, member FINRA SIPC, Robotti and Company Advisors LLC, and an SEC registered investment advisor. Peter, thank you very much for your time today. Always appreciate it, and your feedback. Great speaking with you today.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity. Take care, everybody.
Okay, very good. Take care. Bye-bye.